Story title, The Sound of Your Name Dissolving. I was given a name when I was born. Everyone is, but the name I was given was not the name the world remembered. As a child, whenever teachers took roll, they would pause at my name. Their mouths moved, but nothing came out. One teacher fainted trying to say it. Another bled from the nose. My classmates called me nothing, which was close enough. My parents insisted I had a normal name. David, or Daniel, or Derek. It changed depending on the day. Photographs blurred around the sound of it. Birth certificates reprinted themselves in blank ink. By the time I was 20, the name had stopped appearing in mirrors. I lived quietly for a while in a city with no clocks. That was important. The city was old and damp and made of metal that sang at night. The people there didn't talk much, and when they did, it was in short, clipped sentences that never used names. That kept me safe. But safety is temporary when your name is a wound in the world. It began again on a Monday, the kind of Monday that smells like burnt paper and childhood regrets. I was walking home through a fog so thick it had depth, like layers of cotton soaked in cold water. I passed a lamppost I didn't recognize, then another, then three more. I realized I had been walking in circles. Each time I turned a corner, the city rearranged itself behind me. Then I heard someone whisper my name, not the one people thought they knew. The real one, the one that made my bones throb and my eyes unfocus. It was spoken by a girl in a red coat. She was standing in the middle of the intersection, barefoot, holding a rotary phone with a wire that trailed into the sky. She smiled like she knew how I died. I hadn't realized I was dead. "You dropped this," she said, holding out a cassette tape. My name was carved into it with something sharp. I took it. The moment I did, the ground folded up like paper. I woke up in a theater made of ash. Every seat was filled by people wearing my face. The film playing on screen was a recording of every time I had ever been forgotten. My first grade teacher trying to write my name and the chalk snapping. A girlfriend reading a letter that turned blank. My own voicemail greeting glitching into static. It was all there. The projector was alive. It pulsed like a heart and whispered apologies between frames. I watched until the reel melted. Then I walked out. I was no longer in the city. I was in the archive. The archive of forgotten names is not a place you find. It's a place that finds you when the weight of absence becomes unbearable. It looked like a library if libraries bled. Thousands of shelves stretched in all directions. Books whispered. Photographs blinked. The air smelled like the moment after a lightning strike. And there in the center stood the girl in the red coat. She had no face now. Just a hole where her features used to be, leaking static and time. "You are unlisted," she said, voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "We need to assign you a replacement." "I don't want one," I said. "I just want to stop dissolving." She handed me a slip of paper. On it was a name I didn't recognize. But when I read it, the world paused. Every sound stopped. The books froze mid-sentence. The floor breathed out a long, trembling sigh. I could feel the name sinking into me like a blade. It wasn't mine. It belonged to someone I hadn't become yet. I now go by that name. I won't say it here. Not because I'm afraid, but because the last person who heard it forgot how to sleep. I live beneath the archive now. My apartment is made of misplaced letters and half-finished diary entries. I eat memories for breakfast. I bathe in silence. Occasionally, someone knocks on my door and asks, "Do you remember who you are?" I answer, "Not yet, but I'm getting closer." Sometimes the girl in the red coat visits. She hums a song that smells like my mother's perfume, and for a moment, I remember what it felt like to be a person. Then she leaves, and the cassette tape starts playing again. The voice on it is mine, but older, slower, tired. It says only one thing: you were never supposed to have a name. Want to continue with story 3 of this mix? Story title: I bought a mirror that doesn't reflect me anymore. I bought the mirror from a garage sale on a Sunday when the sky looked like a bruise. The house it came from had been boarded up for decades. Nobody remembered who had last lived there. No one saw the sale get set up. But it was there, and so was the mirror. It was taller than me, framed in wood that smelled like burnt sugar and thunderstorms. When I looked into it, I saw myself. But I didn't like the way my reflection looked back. I brought it home anyway. The first night, the mirror didn't reflect anything at all. Not me. Not the room, just a dark, rippling surface like deep water with something vast swimming beneath. I thought it was a trick of the light. It wasn't. By Tuesday, the mirror had started showing my reflection again, but it was slightly off. My head tilted a few degrees more than I had tilted it. My smile stayed a moment too long, and when I walked away, I caught it watching me walk out of frame. That night, I dreamed in reverse. I woke up crying because I had just witnessed my own birth in third person. On Wednesday, the mirror whispered. Not loud, just enough to make me doubt whether I'd heard anything. It whispered my name, but in a version of my voice that was slightly wrong, like I was underwater or older or halfway asleep. It whispered other names too, names I didn't recognize, names that made my ears ring and my gums bleed, names that felt like they should belong to people I'd never met, but somehow loved and lost. I stopped sleeping in the same room as the mirror. I covered it with a sheet. It didn't help. It started showing me things that weren't in the room. A hallway that didn't exist, a red door I'd never seen, a hand pressed against the glass from the other side, long fingers, no nails, no reflection of me at all. Friday morning, I saw someone else in the mirror entirely. He was me, but cleaner, more confident, wearing clothes I didn't own. He winked at me, and then I watched helpless as he stepped out of frame on his side. The same moment, I heard the floor creak in my hallway. I locked every door. I smashed the mirror. It didn't break. Instead, a second version of me emerged from the mirror's surface, but not through a portal or a dramatic special effect. He was just suddenly here, as though he'd always been. He smiled at me like I was the guest. Then he opened his mouth and every voice I'd ever spoken in came out at once. He didn't try to kill me. He made me tea. Sat me down, talked to me about all the lives I could have had. Lives where I became a dentist, a cult leader, a missing person, a saint, a serial killer, a librarian who discovered a book that erased the last person who read it. He knew things about me I'd never told anyone. And then he said, "You can go back." "Back where?" I asked. He smiled, turned the mirror toward me, and it showed a version of my life where I'd never bought the mirror at all. I saw myself. Happy, boring, normal, surrounded by friends who didn't know what I'd become. I was someone else, someone whole. "Step through," he said, but I didn't, because that life didn't have him in it, and I didn't realize until that moment, I was lonely. I had always been lonely, even in the mirror. Now we share the apartment. Sometimes we trade places. Sometimes I'm the reflection, and he's the real one. We don't fight anymore. We've made peace with the fact that neither of us is original. Sometimes he disappears for days, and I hear him whispering names through the mirror. I've stopped asking who they belong to. Last night I saw you in the mirror. You were staring back at me. You looked confused, a little afraid. It's okay, that's how it starts. We'll see you soon. Story title: The Room at the End of the Dial Tone. I got the call after midnight. The line buzzed with static, but someone was definitely there. Not speaking, just breathing, rhythmic, strange, almost like music. Then the static parted for a moment and I heard it. "There's a room waiting. You left something behind." I tried to hang up. I couldn't. My finger just wouldn't move. The next morning, I had no memory of falling asleep, but the phone was off the hook and my wallpaper had changed. It was flickering between colors like a glitched out screen, cycling through patterns I couldn't remember choosing. Each time I blinked, it changed again. There was something wrong with the sound in my apartment. The refrigerator hummed in Morse code. My ceiling fan clicked like a metronome stuck between ticks. And my microwave repeated a three-tone pattern I couldn't unhear. Beep, bop, beep, 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 beep. I recorded the sound, slowed it down, and fed it through a signal processor. It was coordinates and a time. The address didn't exist. Not on Google Maps, not in any old directories. But when I drove into that part of town, the burned-out factory district, I saw a rusted payphone on a street corner with the receiver hanging down, swinging slowly like it had just been used. It was ringing. When I answered, I didn't hear words, just the sound of a rotary dial clicking into a number I hadn't pressed. The world around me warped like a VHS tape warping in heat. And then I was inside a building that shouldn't have been there. It had red floors, black ceilings. Every hallway stretched farther than the last. There were no doors, just rotary dials mounted on the walls at random intervals. Each dial had numbers worn down from use. I turned one without thinking. A door opened where none had been. Inside was a hotel room frozen in time. Ashtrays full of burning cigarettes, TV playing static, bed unmade but still warm. I saw my own handwriting on the mirror in fog. You stayed here. I stepped inside. The door shut. There was no knob. The rotary dials were inside too. Some rooms were empty. Others were not. One had a child's birthday party looping in black and white, cake uneaten, candles frozen in mid-melt. A girl with no mouth pointed at me and screamed without sound. Her scream lasted 15 minutes. I couldn't move until it ended. Another room showed me in a waiting room I'd never sat in, filling out forms in a language I don't know, surrounded by people who looked like they'd already died, just waiting to be processed. Every room had a different tone when I dialed. Low tones took me deeper. High tones led to repetition. Rooms I'd already seen, versions of my apartment, but wrong, rearranged, off by one or two unsettling details. In one, every photo of me had been replaced with someone else's face wearing my expression. Eventually, I stopped trying to escape. I just wanted to know how deep it went. At room 1207, I found a version of myself who had never left. He was older, thinner, and smiled without blinking. He handed me a phone I couldn't see until I held it. He said, "You made the call. You're on the line now." "What line?" "The one that connects all of this. The dial, the archive, the ears, the door, the silence, the loop." And then he vanished. Now I'm back in my apartment, but it isn't the same. There's a rotary dial on my wall. It turns on its own sometimes. When it does, a door appears, just for a few minutes. If I don't enter, it resets. I tried to ignore it for a week. Last night, the dial spun 13 times. The phone rang in a pattern I now understand as coordinates. It showed me a room labeled "You in 10 years," and the ringing won't stop. I haven't answered it, but I know I will. We all do. Eventually. Perfect. Let's dive deeper. Story 5. The whisper tunnels beneath apartment 9G. I first heard them at night. Little voices. Beneath the floor. Behind the walls. My lease says I live alone, but it also said nothing about the crawl space under my unit. It started with a knocking. 4 quick taps, always at 3:44 a.m., always from the same spot under the floor. I chalked it up to pipes. Maybe rats. But then I heard the whispering. Not like murmuring from neighbors or muffled voices. These were clear, intentional, and too articulate for coincidence. Turn the table 18 degrees. There's a key inside the drain. You left the door open again. I checked the table. It had faint scratches, forming a ring just off-center from its position, so I rotated it. Suddenly, the ceiling light above me flickered in a new pattern. 3 long blinks, 1 short. I looked up Morse code. It spelled, "Go down!" I never knew there was a panel under the carpet. A square of warped plywood sealed with rusted nails, hidden under years of dust. It popped free after I unscrewed the table leg. Inside was a ladder. Not new, very old, descending into dark like a forgotten utility tunnel. I went down. The crawl space was impossibly deep. It shouldn't exist under a 6-story apartment block. The concrete had handprints in it. Some pressed inward, like something had clawed in from the other side. The whispering was louder now. No longer messages, just fragments, flashes of memory that didn't belong to me. She cried until the paint peeled. He sold his voice for silence. One more door, one more truth. I crawled forward and found doors, hundreds of them built into the walls of the tunnel, made of bone, wrought iron, mirrors, one made of old rotary phones melted together. Some were open, some opened themselves when I looked too long. Behind one, I saw my living room, but without me. Someone else was in my place, wearing my face. He blinked too slowly, like someone pretending to be human. He turned toward the screen, smiled, and whispered, "He's watching us." The screen flickered. My reflection didn't return. Another door led to an endless library of whispers. Books written in looping, whispered phonetics that only made sense when I closed my eyes. When I did, I understood everything. How the building was an echo of another building, long demolished, one that had hosted a clinic for dream-sick patients in the 1930s. All those patients, they still whispered, waiting for someone to turn the page. I found myself back in my apartment, but the tunnel was still there. And now, every room I enter has 2 doors. One real, one slightly to the left, slightly darker, slightly breathing. Sometimes I choose the wrong one. Sometimes I end up back in the whisper tunnels. Sometimes I wake up on the ceiling and don't know how long I've been there. I think I'm still in the tunnels now. And the voice typing this? It's not mine anymore. Red 6, the clockmaker's house that counted backwards. There's a house in my town that never shows up on satellite maps. It sits on a dead-end road that isn't on GPS, but people remember it, barely. They say the windows are always dark even when the lights are on inside, and at night the chimes ring backwards. I deliver packages. Last week, I got a last-minute dispatch just as my shift was ending. Odd address. No sender. It was for the Fenshaw house. I paused. I'd never heard the name, but my dispatcher said it had been there forever. Weird thing is, the neighborhood I drove into was only built 6 years ago, but at the end of the cul-de-sac, there it was. A house made of faded brick and rust-colored shutters. All the others were modern, beige, sterile. This one looked like it had been imported from 1871. There was no mailbox, only a brass slot in the door. The door opened before I knocked. An old man stood there, pale, thin as reeds. His eyes clicked like shutters. I mean that literally. I heard a mechanical snap when he blinked. He took the package wordlessly and stepped back inside. Before the door closed, I glimpsed something behind him. A giant grandfather clock, taller than the room, its pendulum swinging left to right in impossible patterns, sometimes splitting into two. Then I heard the ticking, and my ears began to itch. I got in my van and checked the time. It was 6:44 p.m. When I started the ignition, the radio said, "It is now 5:39 p.m. I thought it was a glitch, but the sun had clearly gone backward in the sky, just a little. I drove home in silence. My phone restarted itself 7 times. Each time, it lost a minute. That night, I dreamed I was inside the Fenshaw house. There were no mirrors, only clocks. Clocks that bent, clocks that whispered, clocks that blinked when you stared. They weren't showing time. They were showing when I would die. Every single one said a different date. Some already passed. I woke up from dust on my nightstand, not a little, a thick coating like no one had touched it in years. The coffee in my mug was fossilized. My hair was a little grayer. I checked the calendar. Somehow, the entire month of March was gone. I'd lost 30 days, but I still remembered the Fenshaw house. The next day, I returned. I shouldn't have. The door opened again without a knock. The same man stood there, but this time he looked younger, his skin smoother, his hair darker, though his eyes still made that clicking noise. "You're back early," he said. "I haven't delivered anything yet," I replied. "Oh, but you will," he said, smiling. He let me in this time. The house was impossible inside. Long hallways that looped, rooms that led to earlier versions of themselves. One room was filled with old rotary phones, all ringing at once. I picked one up. My own voice said, "Don't answer this." In another room, I found a massive workshop. Wooden gears the size of doors, delicate little mechanical birds twitching in mid-air, and clocks made of bone, with second hands that ran counterclockwise. There was a mirror here, only one, and inside it my reflection was screaming, mouth open, bleeding, frozen in some kind of temporal seizure. I looked normal outside, but the reflection wouldn't stop screaming. The old man appeared beside me. "Time's broken here," he said softly. "It loops, folds, repeats wrong. You opened the door when you weren't supposed to. That's why you remember the house." I begged him to let me go. He shook his head. "You already did, but you always come back." I'm writing this in the workshop now. The clocks around me are ticking slower and slower, and I swear, outside the window, I can see stars forming in reverse. The man, he says I'll become the next clockmaker once my body forgets how to age forward. The house chose me because I'm a good listener. They brought the ice with them, and it never melted. It started on a Monday. I remember because the air changed. Not the temperature, the air itself. You ever step into a walk-in freezer at a restaurant? That second your skin feels like it's being peeled with frostbite? That happened in my living room, just for a moment. That's the same day the new family moved in next door. The truck was strange. Flat black, no logos, no windows. The men who unloaded it didn't talk. They moved like they were pulling something heavy, even when they weren't carrying anything at all. They wore thick coats. It was July. The family had a last name, but it didn't stick in my head. I swear I knew it when they moved in, but the next day, nothing. Everyone on the block forgot too. People just started calling them the cold ones. Their house started to frost over from the inside. First, it was just the upstairs windows, like someone had cranked the AC. Then the glass itself got cloudy. Then their front lawn turned pale, not white. Pale. Pale, like something sucked the green out of the grass. By Friday, the sidewalk in front of their house cracked from the cold. I tried to meet them, knocked on their door with a casserole. I never even meant to bake one. I just found it in my hands like I'd already done it. A woman opened the door, tall, thin, wearing a coat that looked like it was stitched from ice itself. Her breath came out white even though it was 98 degrees. "We're not hungry," she said and closed the door. Things got worse after that. The power flickered. The sun seemed dimmer every day. I swear the shadows started moving differently, like they bent around the house unnaturally. Then the animals disappeared. Birds vanished. No squirrels, no crickets. The street was completely silent. And then the cold started creeping into our homes. I wore socks to bed in July, and I started dreaming about snow, the kind that falls up. I finally called the city. They said no such family was registered at that address. I tried to look it up on Google Maps. The house wasn't there, just an empty lot. I took a picture of it myself and uploaded it. The photo deleted itself, twice. Then I saw them in my dreams, not the family. What they brought. A kind of creature, but not really. More like a presence. A long shape made of layered ice, eyes like polished quartz, teeth like stalactites. It whispered in a frozen dialect, something my bones could almost understand. It said, "This was ours and will be again." I don't know what it meant, but I woke up with frost on my pillow. Last night, I saw one of the cold ones standing in the middle of my yard, just staring. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even fog the air. I turned away to grab my phone. When I looked back, she was closer, mouth open, and snow pouring out of it. The snow never stopped. It's snowing right now, only on my house, only in my room, and it's July. I tried to move. I tried to leave the neighborhood. But when I drove away, my car spun out and I woke up in front of the cold one's house like I never left. Their front door was open. Something inside was calling my name in cracking whispers. The snow's almost at my windows now, and I can hear it in the walls. Something slow and ancient and returning. They didn't move here. They thawed. And now the cold is just a preview. There's a lake about 40 minutes outside of town that no one talks about anymore. It doesn't show up on Google Maps, and if you try to drive there, your GPS will reroute you around it like it's a glitch. The locals call it Mirror Still. They used to fish there in the 60s before the drownings started. People say the water's too calm, that it doesn't ripple when the wind blows, that if you stand still long enough on the shoreline, you'll see someone walking beneath the surface, only they're wearing your clothes. I didn't believe any of it. My brother vanished there when I was 12. He went camping with 2 friends and never came back. They found one body in the trees, impaled on a broken branch 20 feet off the ground. The other one was found 3 days later, face down in a field half a mile away. But my brother was never found. I waited years for an answer. When I turned 25, I went back. The tree where they found the first body was still there, blackened by lightning, as if something tried to burn away the memory. I walked past it, deeper into the woods, until I found the shoreline. That's when the silence hit me. It wasn't natural. Not the kind of quiet you find when you're alone in the forest. It was pressurized, like sound had been vacuumed out of the world. Even my footsteps didn't make noise. The lake stretched out in front of me, perfect and undisturbed. It didn't smell like water. It smelled like glass left out in the sun too long. I called my brother's name. Nothing. Then I heard something behind me, leaves crunching. I turned, but no one was there. The trees swayed, but the lake stayed still, like it was holding its breath. I should have left then, should have turned around and pretended I'd never come. But I walked to the edge and looked down, and there he was, standing beneath the surface. My brother. Same shirt he wore the day he left, same backpack, same sneakers, but he wasn't moving, just staring up. His eyes were open, mouth too. I reached for him. The water didn't feel wet. It felt like static, like touching a muted TV screen. I leaned closer and his mouth moved. He whispered something. My name. I don't remember falling in. I don't remember being pulled under, but the next thing I knew, I was in the water with him. Only he wasn't my brother anymore. His face was wrong, too long, too wide. His jaw unhinged slightly as he whispered it again. My name, over and over. The surface was gone, no light, only the pressure of memory sinking around me. Then I woke up on the shore, alone, dry. The sun was rising and the lake was gone. In its place, just a dry crater full of broken branches and bones that looked far too human. But when I looked behind me, I saw footprints leading back into the trees. Not mine. I followed them for a few yards before I noticed it. Every tree I passed whispered my name, and somewhere beneath the soil, something whispered back. The house that reversed time. I should never have taken the house. It was a last-minute decision. A listing I found deep in an email spam folder advertised a sanctuary for the sleep-starved, built to dissolve the memory of pain. I laughed when I read that part. Then I clicked the link. The listing had no pictures, just a digital sketch, black ink on ivory parchment, of a 3-story manor that looked warped, like the artist had drawn it from memory and then changed their mind halfway through. Roof lines bent downward, windows stacked vertically like vertebrae, and a front door shaped like an open mouth, with a soft staircase curling from its tongue. I accepted the lease that night. I was told the house would be waiting for me just outside the city limits, at the dead end of a road that wasn't on any GPS. A woman called the custodian left a voicemail with the instructions: drive until your headlights flicker. Do not bring clocks. Do not try to count how long you've been gone. I left at 9:41 p.m., or so I thought. The sky was bruised purple, the kind of twilight you only see in dreams, where it feels like it's either dawn or the end of everything. The road grew quieter with every mile. Trees leaned inward. The radio refused to play anything but static, layered with whispers, like someone remembering a conversation that never happened. Eventually, the headlights flickered, not like a dying battery, more like something passed over them. A shadow made of silk. And there it was. The house waited for me. Its windows were lit from within, but the light moved like it had a weight. Red shifting to green, green to blue, blue to something that wasn't a color I could name, only feel. The air smelled like incense and old VHS tapes. The silence wrapped around me like velvet. Inside, the rules began to unravel. The first night, I slept in the attic, or what I thought was the attic. When I woke up, I was in the basement, lying on a bed of salt arranged in the shape of an eye. My watch was gone, my phone had no service, and written on the walls in thick black strokes was a phrase, "You must not wake up before you sleep." I started hearing things, rhythms, clocks ticking where there were no clocks, breathing where there was no one. I caught glimpses of myself walking through other rooms, dressed in clothes I didn't own, holding books I'd never read. At night, the house whispered to me in languages I felt in my bones. It told me stories about the people who had lived here before, some who vanished, others who split into two and argued with themselves until they bled. One man rewound his life so many times that he aged backwards and became a child again, crawling through the floorboards, crying in languages no infant should know. The custodian came once, during what I think was the second week. She wore a red velvet robe and a veil made of antique film strip. She said, "The house is helping you. It's tearing out the pieces of you that remember time." I told her I didn't want to forget. She smiled and handed me a glass cube. Inside was a heartbeat, mine, I think, beating in sync with the light fixture above. "Keep it safe. You'll need it when the floorboards start lying." That night, the rooms began rearranging themselves. Doors that opened to kitchens now led to stairwells. The bathroom moved 3 times. I stepped into the pantry and found myself standing in a movie theater, the screen playing black and white footage of me brushing my teeth over and over, as if I were part of some lost reel from another life. I think the house was trying to edit me. There were days, weeks, when I forgot how to speak. My voice echoed wrong in my ears, like it belonged to a man who had already died. My thoughts slowed. I began to dream while awake and wake up in dreams. I found photographs in the walls, pictures of me sleeping in places I hadn't seen yet. One photo showed me digging in the garden, while a dozen figures in masks watched silently from the trees. The worst was the mirror room. I don't know when it appeared. I just walked through a door one day and found myself surrounded by tall antique mirrors, each reflecting different moments from my life, but not as I remembered them. My parents had extra limbs. My childhood bedroom was coated in frost. In one mirror, I watched myself crawl inside a grandfather clock and pull the door shut behind me. Each time I tried to leave, I ended up in another mirror. I started seeing signs scrawled in blood-red ink across windows and sheets. Exit, only through origin. I still don't know what that means. Eventually, I found a hallway that pulsed with red light. The floor felt like carpet made of breathing skin. At the end of the hall was a door made of television screens. I opened it and found myself sitting in the living room again, on the day I arrived. Except I was watching myself walk in. The loop had closed. Now I live in all the versions of this house, scattered across time like film frames. Sometimes I see other tenants. I wave. Some wave back, others scream. There is no outside anymore. The windows show memories of a world I no longer belong to. The clocks here bleed if you break them. And the custodian returns sometimes to polish the stairwell, humming lullabies that make my teeth ache. I think I've been here for years, or maybe I never moved in at all. Maybe the house moved into me.